Kehed Miha Falcha. Welcome everyone, my name is Darren Kuzma and this is another webinar of Mind the CRAIC, your online life hacks, where we discuss life improvement tools based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard. So today we're starting a new short series on the subject of communication and looking at all the different aspects of that. Today's topic then is increasing your confidence in communication. So since this is the first one, I'm also going to put in an additional introduction to communication and a very broad overall look. And since confidence is very key in communicating well, I'm touching on that first. So before I get started, I'd just like to orient with whoever is joining me on Zoom. I'm here live in a Zoom chat, so if you want to send me a thumbs up or a wave or anything like that, and the reactions, your chat box and things like that, I'm also open so you can communicate if you have any questions or if you'd like to originate any of your own examples, because I'm going to give a number of them. I'm doing it in this webinar format so that you can engage with me in this way, because I feel that it's very important not only just to watch a video on the internet, whether it be YouTube or anything else, and by the way, welcome to everyone on the platforms of Instagram, Facebook and YouTube, but when you're engaged in a webinar and you're answering the questions for yourself, or you're participating by offering some answers to the questions that I might have for you to me, it allows you to consider your past and have a look at your activities that you've been involved in before, and then look at the new information that I'm presenting and see how they kind of fit together for you. At least considering will broaden your understanding or reality on the subject. Okay, so I'd just like to say that not only is there's myself here on Zoom, following on the other platforms there is a host. Her name is Michelle. So if you have any communications, comments, questions to put on those platforms, put them in the comment section and then Michelle will pass them over to me as she can. Alright, so let's get started. What do I have to do with communication? What is my experience or my history? Well, I've always been communicating, as most humans on this planet have been. Whether it has been just in normal communication, I have had extra forms of communication. I play a musical instrument. I did a lot of singing when I was in high school. I did performing arts, theater, and things like that. And then in my professional career, I did a lot of lecturing and running seminars and taking workshops and communicating complex, let's say, concepts and complex ideas to people that aren't familiar with technical fields. From dealing with children to dealing with people at all ends of the literary spectrum, from one to the other. So I have a lot of experience in communicating with people, one-on-one and in groups. I will say that there's 4 major points that have helped me improve my communication throughout my life, and I say 4 to give it a bit of a rough number. 2 before I learned the work of L. Ron Hubbard, and 2 after. And the 2 before, I would say, came down to the fact that I got involved in theater at a very young age. I think I was 8 or 9, performing on stage at the end of year sort of concerts and things like that, and even other things in between, you know. And I feel that that in particular, aside from anything else, is a very, very important starting point for anyone in communication to gain confidence. And one of the things that I think that relates to is that children do tend to be less inhibited than adults, because, you know, negative experience and things kind of collects to your baggage as you get older. But as a child, there's an innocence and an idea, since you accept everyone else as a child. You have a lot of freedom of thought and mind, and you dream about a lot of things, that as a child, the earlier that you get exposed to being in front of people and presenting, that you get exposed to being creative and expressing yourself, that really can create such confidence at such an early age and experience, that the experience can carry you along with an understanding retained in your mind that, oh, it's fine, you know, there's no problem with it, I can do it. And by having that experience and being able to do it at a very young age, I think that is one thing that carried me through the rest of my life at being reasonably, or what I would consider to be, confident in my communication. And another point from that is that within my family there was a lot of emphasis on speaking correctly. not using swear words, not enunciating and mumbling in incorrect ways, but speaking clearly. And one thing that I have definitely noticed throughout my life is that people that speak clearly are actually people that come across as confident speakers. So those two factors really did, I feel, set me up for either presenting confidence or being accustomed to it, being exposed to many different types of audiences. So then, as I continued through my professional life in doing workshops and seminars, around that time I learned the technology of L. Ron Hubbard and the broad works that he has on the subject of communication. And I had two particular things that were of incredible benefit in following L. Ron Hubbard. One is the fact that there are a number of drills that L. Ron Hubbard has worked out that will orient someone on a gradient basis. And if you've been following webinars like this before, you will have understood that the point on gradients is a very, very important thing. But breaking down all aspects of communication into their smallest parts and drilling in an actual scenario with another person, drilling the components of communication until you feel confident with just that aspect, and then adding something else to it, and then drilling that. So the drilling, the practice, and the rehearsal in a learning setting was absolutely key for me to take on certain projects and feel very confident in doing anything that I do with regard to communication. So that was one thing. And then the second part of the absolute genius of L. Ron Hubbard that I discovered in all of his works is that the formula of communication, which I'm not going to go over in full in this webinar because it is very detailed, but that detail and the precision of isolating each of the components of communication again allows you to mentally compartment each aspect of what it is that you're doing, and having that clear delineation, that clear separation between each of the components allows you to reflect and look at which parts of your communication are you good at and which parts of the communication are you not, or where you need improvement. And I think that formula and that separation of all its component parts in absolute detail is probably one of the greatest gifts that I have received in regard to understanding communication, in regard to being confident in communicating. And the reason for that is related to, and if you've been watching the webinars before, you'll understand, L. Ron Hubbard discovered a relationship between knowledge, responsibility, and control, and those three things forming a triangle. As in, one factor or any one of those parts of the triangle being enhanced will enhance the other two parts of the triangle. So improving knowledge, as I'm talking about, having a clear separation of all the small and precise parts of communication and having a formula, so to speak, of communication. Having each one of those parts, having the knowledge of that, really helps you to control your communication in a very exact and detailed way that gives you that control and then enables you to be responsible. And when I say responsible, I'm not just saying for my own communication, but just simply through me communicating with another person, because I understand the component parts. Any deficiency in the person that I'm communicating with, I can actually help repair during the communication with that person. So, if you're interested in learning more, I hope that did encourage you. So here we go. I'm going to look at some definitions because I think that helps us to orient the subject a bit more clearly than rather getting lost in all the different possibilities. So I'm going to take a definition first of all from the Oxford Dictionary, which you can find online. Communication: the imparting, so the giving out or the sending out, pushing from you to somewhere else. So the imparting or exchanging of information by speaking, writing, or using some other medium. Okay, let's break that down a little bit. So it's the pushing out or the giving of, so you're imparting something, or you're exchanging. So it's going from one location to another, and then that location back to you. That's exchanging information by speaking, blah, 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 blah. Writing, there you go, passing a note. or using some other medium. So a medium would be like a form, like it could be electronic communication, it could be simply sound, it could be sign language, it could be even body language. So these are the forms of these other mediums, and having that exchange or simply the imparting is the Oxford Dictionary's definition of communication. Now, if we look at the origin of the word communication, it'll shed a little bit of light as we come to some later information. And the origin of it is the word from Latin, communis, which means shared. So when you share something, you don't just have it yourself, you have it yourself and you give it across to something else or someone else, let's say. So if I have bread and I share it, I give a little bit of it to someone else. I don't give all of it, but I give a little bit of it there. Okay, so that origin and the derivation there will have some bearing on something I'm going to tell you shortly. Okay, so as a very first point, as a starting point to orient with the works of L. Ron Hubbard, I'm just going to give this one short message. It gives from this book, actually, and this book is called The Scientology Fundamentals of Thought, and it is a fantastic book to get oriented at a sort of good broad stroke of all of the concepts in Scientology that at their very basic level. So it doesn't go into massive detail in each of the concepts, but it covers them all to a very good degree so that you can get an orientation on how ordered and organized Scientology is. So anyway, from this book here, L. Ron Hubbard said, communication is essentially something which is sent and which is received. So something which is sent and which is received. The intention, okay, so he's going to talk about intention here. So intention is you in your mind having an idea or intending to do something, whether it occurs in the blink of an eye or whether it's been something that's premeditated or thought about over a long period of time and planned in a way. Okay, so this is an intention. So he says, the intention to send and the intention to receive must both be present in some degree before an actual communication can take place. So again, we're talking about the derivation being shared, okay? And we're looking at intention to receive, to send, and the intention to receive need to be present. So if we're looking at just a one-way communication, and we will see later on that there is one-way communication, as in from me saying something to another, and there is two-way communication, me saying something to another, and then another in return saying something back to me. But this intention to receive has to be in that other person. And this is one of those things that when you break it down to its component parts, is what I was saying that helped me hugely, is that if the other person does not have the intention to receive the communication from you, then you're potentially not communicating. Okay, so I'll finish what he has written here. I'm going to read that last sentence again. The intention to send and the intention to receive must both be present in some degree before an actual communication can take place. All right, so with that concept there, I'm going to move on to confidence, but you can see some communications which appear to be communications actually aren't. And whether you want to class that as the babble that occurs online or the incessant non-stop talk or speak from another person toward you, which you have absolutely no intention of listening to and are probably more interested in the football or something else that's on television than listening to that. And we will discuss some of the aspects of what drives someone out of communication and into another subject. We'll look at that later on in another webinar. But just getting across the idea that communication can appear to be communication, but not actually, per what I had just read. Okay, so now on to confidence. So let's break things down into parts, and I'm not going to give the titles or the words as L. Ron Hubbard had given in this formula or as in these precise breakdowns of communication, but I'm just going to give you some examples of communicating and then different examples of the parts and how confidence relates to that. Okay, so you might have problems in confidence in communication in just being there. Now, what does that mean? Well, I myself, and I'm going to take me participating in these webinars as an example all throughout this series, because I think me showing you, or you being able to look back at some videos or explaining to you the process that I've gone through will help you understand how it actually is applied, because you'll see it. So confidence in being there. Well, if you've ever had a situation where you're sitting there calmly and you're at work perhaps, or you're at home, you're sitting there watching television, or you're sitting there doing your work and you're typing away on the computer, and there's no agitation, there's no concern, you're not scratching your head, you're not doing anything, you're just typing away on an email on your computer, and then your boss comes to talk to you, and next thing you do, you start twirling your pen around, and you start, scratching the edges of your fingers, and you start doing this and scratching here and doing all this sort of thing. So those things can be manifestations of you not actually being comfortable in that communication. Actually just being there and receiving a communication can be very uncomfortable for people. I'm not sure if anyone has an example or anything that they would like to share, or that you've seen other people. But you can see someone potentially, in a shop, browsing through items, and as soon as a shop assistant comes and they get all nervous, no, I'm fine, it's okay, it's fine. So just being there actually is an aspect of being confident in communication. And someone that is not comfortable with just being there will actually display visual cues or visual movements, motions and twitches and things like that that show that they're not actually confident. And just as I had mentioned earlier, on stage someone can be anxious and as nervous as the first night performance in front of a big crowd, but actually compose themselves. And those drills that I spoke about that L. Ron Hubbard had put together is one of the things where you can drill over and over and actually remove those nervous type mannerisms from your communication. So if you've had problems with being confident in your communication that way, well, that will certainly be something that will help you. Okay, so then there's also confidence in presenting. So just being there is one thing, but then as you're doing, like I am right now, I'm sitting in front of a camera and I'm moving my hands. It's something for me that just happens naturally. I have trained myself at certain times to be very composed if the hand movements are perhaps a little bit distracting, but it feels a bit more natural for me when I put some hand movements into it, but I don't have my attention on it. Some people, when they're doing presentations and they've got a laser pointer or they've got something, is that they don't know what they're actually doing as part of presentation. Are they dressed well enough? Or how is my tie? How do I look? All those various sort of things. So having confidence in communication when you're presenting something has a whole aspect of its own. And if you've had your attention or worry on any of those things, you can see that it's going to remove your intention, or it's going to detract from your intention to get a message across. If you've got your attention on yourself and what are you doing and how do you look and did I do my hair, all those various things. Okay. Also, there is a confidence that comes with knowing what you're saying. And I have definitely seen myself, having trained a number of other people in my professional field, when they first enter upon doing workshops or doing presentations, they might be having a good amount of knowledge on the subject that they're presenting, but their uncertainties on certain subjects will absolutely show through in their presentation. Because then you can see this. Someone will be presenting something, and as they're talking, they slow in their communication, or their eyes dart around a little bit where they're trying to think of what to say. And I have then gone back with people that I have instructed. I said, good, so what were you not certain about there? Well, actually, I didn't really know if that fellow that was sitting in the front was going to ask me a question about something, and I wasn't sure if I could answer it because he was kind of a bit testy. So the aspect of being absolutely certain of the subject or of the content that you're presenting is another factor in you being confident in communicating. I'm sure you've experienced, perhaps maybe not, but at my high school we did these impromptu talks where you were given a subject. This wasn't in theatre classes, this was actually in English classes. It's an impromptu talk. Good, so your subject is trees. Speak for 1 minute. And just out of your head you have to pull together certain pieces of information. Now, you would be lucky from time to time because maybe you had a lot of experience with regard to trees, and so therefore you could speak easily. But if you don't have knowledge in a subject, or you don't know your subject very well, or there are many things within your subject that you are confused about yourself, it will detract from your confidence. So this is where you should have a look at all of our study and learning webinars, because in those webinars we talk about how to learn effectively and how to learn difficult subjects. And therefore, if you have a subject that you need to present and you want to make sure that you fully understand it, then anyway, watch those webinars and take some tips from there. Okay, so there is also not only the certainty of content, but there is knowing what you're going to say. And this is where I'm going to reveal a little bit about what I'm doing in these webinars here, because I have on purpose decided not to rehearse too much of the content. Some of you might say, well, that's obvious, but the purpose is I want to drill myself into being able to think on my feet with minimum of notes. And I've done that on purpose because I don't want to have to prepare for many, many hours and drill everything over and over and over just to do a webinar, and I'm sometimes doing them twice a day. I also have other activities that I need to do. So in order for me to get good at this, I'm drilling, or I'm using a certain format with minimum notes, and I'm learning mechanically by just doing it to think on my feet and to be able to then keep smooth with my sentences and not get confused, etc., etc. And that, knowing what to say, I'm trying to remove a little bit by making it as natural as possible. And so by putting myself under stress many times, I will develop, the mental machinery will kick in, or just the experience will have me become more comfortable in that situation without knowing exactly what I'm going to say. But that can certainly be one thing that can detract from your confidence. Okay, another part of confidence is actually, are you confident to know whether or not you were received? And this has a particular part within that whole communication formula, is that when you give a communication to someone, and it's even increasingly hard, let's say over email or text message, because there's no emotional expression that goes with that. You might get an email, you send a proposal across of some sort or a request to someone, and they say, yes, thank you, and that's it. Now, were they busy that day? Did they give you a short and impolite reply because they weren't interested in what you had to say and they're just brushing you off? Well, that's one thing aside. In written communication has a bit more difficulty, but in interpersonal communication that is face-to-face, how can you be confident that what you just said was actually received by that person? And there is an entire aspect of this communication formula that L. Ron Hubbard put together that will allow you to be more able to understand if the message that you got across to that person is the message that you intended for them to receive. So that, of course, affects your communication, because if you're at the front of an audience or you're speaking to someone and you're blah, 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 talking about something, and their eyes have glazed over and they're looking into the distance, or they seem like they're daydreaming, then that can certainly affect your communication. It might introvert you or make you think, oh God, what did I say? Did I say the wrong thing? Now they look like they're not interested. And that might especially be the case if you're looking at someone that you fancy and trying to involve them in a conversation to increase their desire toward liking you. Okay, so if you'd like to participate on any of the platforms there, any situations you've got yourself into where you have not had confidence, or particular problems that you have run into with regard to confidence, any scenarios that you'd like any assistance with, put them into the chat, send them across. Anything at all you'd like, questions or comments, put them in. I'd like to hear from you. And Michelle, if you have anything there, I'm talking to the computer, whereas of course I don't need to. But Michelle, if you have anything on those comments coming in on the other platforms, please send them through to Zoom for me. Okay, so how do these things make you feel? Well, when you lack confidence, you can certainly feel embarrassed. And you may have been in a situation before where you had to get up and make an announcement at work, or an announcement in front of a group of people that perhaps you didn't know so well. You probably noticed that there is a bit of a scale of embarrassment. The closer people are to you, like your family, if you're at the family dinner table and you want to make an announcement, it's like complete second nature. But if you're just new at a workplace and you've not really spoken to anyone before, and the boss says, okay, so at staff meeting, okay, so tell everyone else about you. And then you have to get up in front of a room full of people that you don't know and speak about yourself. Can be quite embarrassing. Well, understanding the components of communication and drilling on a gradient, all these different component parts, will certainly help with that. Now, if you are not confident in your communication, it can lower the opinion that another person might have of you. It might make you therefore feel shy at going back and repeating again if you mess something up the first time. It might make you so embarrassed that that you have physical reactions. You might flush red, or you might get pins and needles in your fingers, or your hands might start to sweat, or you might get very dry in throat and not able to talk. Well, all of these reactions can be handled and can be improved through doing these drills and understanding these components, as I said. Now, also, one of the things is that if you're not confident, and this is certainly something that, again, I spoke about children and how getting them into perhaps performing arts or performing in front of people from a very early age is a very good thing. But there is also a negative side to children as they are growing up, is that they also quite often don't have the social restraint that adults do, well, that we hope we do, and that they can often ridicule and make fun of someone that hasn't been successful or confident in their communication. So therefore, learning the tools for communication and learning these components and drilling them in, even at a very, very young age, has incredible value, because getting along in the world or doing anything in the world relies upon communication. And even if you are a hermit and you intend on being a computer programmer or an esports gamer at home, you still have to have an awareness of communication, because you still have to deal with people. So learning things at a very early age is definitely key. When you aren't confident in communicating, the world can seem very big and you can seem very small. You can want to shrivel up in a ball and go and hide in a corner if you're not confident, if you make mistakes or you mess things up. And some of that, actually a lot of that, does have to do with what's happening in your mind. And when someone is communicating, and rather than having their intention on getting their message out to someone, they have so much attention on themselves, worry and question and concern about how they look, and oh, I'm feeling this, and maybe my posture is not good, and all that sort of thing, is that it can be a very introverting, worrying and troubling experience when you don't know these component parts and you haven't actually drilled them and practiced them and understand how they are part of communication, seeing what you need to improve and what not. So communication will make you more able, and being confident in your communication will only enhance that even further. So as I've spoken about some of these components, I haven't given them their exact, let's say, scientific terminology and given definitions for them. But as we go over the next number of webinars, these components we are going to break down, and we're going to examine them, look at different situations of how not knowing about a certain component or not knowing about a certain aspect of communication will certainly reduce your communication, impair it, and therefore what things you can do about it. So we'll give you some hints on that. I'd like to finish off with rounding out something else on the subject of communication, because communication isn't just the giving and receiving of ideas, but part of communication is also perception. And this is definitely a concept from L. Ron Hubbard, that perception, like sight, hearing, touch, and things like that, they are all communication. And yes, seeing things and looking at body language is already been recognized as part of communication. Same with touch as the communication. But every perception is actually part of this, you could say, spectrum of communication. So we're going to definitely look at some of those things as we go along through these different webinars. So before I end off, if there's any questions, you could put them through now. If there's any particular thing, because we've got 2 weeks on communication, if there's any particular component or aspect or part of communication that you're confused about, that you would really like to hear what L. Ron Hubbard's ideas are on that, or you'd like to have some input, please put it into the comment section. If you'd like to learn about communicating with children in particular, then put something in there, because I want to make sure that we cover at least all of the different things that you have as questions, that we address them with some important points that will help you improve, and all to the very end, I will let you know in the Zoom chat here and also on the platforms that you're following, with its Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. There will be a link that will appear. If you'd like to get further oriented with this book and what L. Ron Hubbard says about communication and the various other basic principles in Scientology, there will be a link for you to purchase this book. And further than that, if you would like to have a consultation with one of our staff, there's no obligation, you don't need to do anything further, but just to talk and discuss what different things that you're running into in your life, to find out what tools that you could use or learn in order to improve yourself or your situation. There'll be another link that will appear that will allow you to register for that free consultation. So I hope you do take me up on that, because if you're looking or watching this video and you want to improve something, then absolutely the body of knowledge that L. Ron Hubbard has written will definitely have something there that you can look at, and maybe that'll help you greatly. Okay, so I'm going to end off, and Michelle has given me the indication there that we don't have anything else to talk about. So that's communication. I hope you will join me on the next webinar, where we're going to look at this first aspect of talking in front of people or being comfortable. Another word for it is being able to confront. So be there comfortably and actually just from point zero, not be uncomfortable with being with another person or being in front of a group of people. So we're going to look at that particular component on our next webinar. I hope you will join me. Shine for today.